Hallelujah. Welcome again to our 15 minutes podcast. Remember, we started this series last Monday on the subject of don't eat communion everywhere. Don't eat communion everywhere. And we took our text from 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verses 1 to 4, then 16 to 21. And we saw some important words. Don't be ignorant, even though most of us are ignorant. He said the people in the Old Testament eat the same spiritual food, meat, and drink with us. That means that if they did, as you saw, they did, then when Paul said, behold, in verse 18, when he said, behold, Israel after the flesh, are not they which eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar? And then he now spoke about, he said that, for we being many are one bread and one body, for we are all partakers of that one bread. You see, partaker of. They are partaker of the altar. We are partaker of that one bread. Did you see now? But he said it is the same spiritual meat. In other words, what they ate in the Old Testament is what we also eat in the New Testament. And it's not different. It's Jesus. You know, they ate goat meat and they drank and they used the blood of the goat. But you see, in the New Testament, we don't look for goat meat to eat. We use bread to signify the body of Christ. And then we use black currant to signify the blood of Christ. But Paul said, by implication, we are actually eating Jesus. And you know, in the Old Testament, it talks about the altar. Now, he didn't use the word bread, because what they did was that they sacrificed and then they used blood. But you see, they eat the meat in front of the altar, and he said they are partaker of the altar. Now, in the New Testament, we use bread and black currant, and he said we are partaker of the bread. So partaker means partners, meaning you are companion, meaning you become one with the altar. So that brings the subject of altar to be very important when it comes to communion. And that means you cannot eat communion just anywhere. You can't eat communion just anywhere. Okay, so we're going to press on further. Now, we have discovered that the communion that we serve with bread and with black currant is not actually the bread and the black currant that we see physically with our eyes. There's more to it. We know that from the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, it said that bread, that meat, and that blood is of Christ. Hallelujah. So now, also talking to us in the New Testament means that these things are spiritual things. The spiritual thing. So he brought the subject of altar into play. Now that means we must understand this altar, because he now brought also the devil into communion's teaching. He said you cannot be a partaker of the Lord's table and be a partaker of the devil's table. Now, when does communion become partakers of the devil's table? Now that's what we need to iron out. That's what we need to learn. So I want you to understand this as we go deeper in this teaching, that this Paul's first book of Corinthians is about the communion that we serve in our churches and the danger of where it is served. And this is testified by him in 1 Corinthians 16:17, when he said, the cup of the blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? For we being many are one bread and one body, for we are partakers of that one bread. Wow. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. Of that one bread. So meaning that this First Corinthians is talking about communion. His subject is actually the subject of communion, but he has to call our attention to a couple of other things that doesn't want us to be ignorant of. Now, many people today eat communion, but they are ignorant of this truth. And do you know what? It's not an excuse. You can ignorantly eat yourself to death. You can ignorantly bring yourself under oppression. But you see, after this thing, you will no longer be ignorant, and I believe that many people will be free. Okay, so I want us to get it that this subject in 1 Corinthians 10 is the subject of communion. But there are a couple of things we should not be ignorant of, and that is what Paul is talking about. So you cannot eat communion just anywhere. Just anywhere. Here is where the altar means a serious significance when it comes to eating the communion, because physical things are used in representing the body. Physical things are used in representing the body and the blood of Christ. The altar is what sanctified the item we used for the communion according to Jesus. You get what I just said now? Now what I'm saying is this. Listen to this. What I'm saying is this. Now it is evident that Paul is teaching the subject of communion. He's teaching the subject of communion. He said it in that 1 Corinthians 10:16, and he put question mark. He said, the cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? Question mark. In Acts 17, I said, for we being many are one bread and one body, for we are all partakers of that one bread. So that brought us to be one with the body of Christ. With the body of Christ. Are you hearing me now? Now, because he now brought the subject of communion into it, we now become one. So the subject of altar into it, we now become one with the altar. We become one with the altar from where we eat. And listen to this. Now, the altar becomes very significant because Jesus said the altar sanctifies. Listen to me. The bread you brought for communion, do you know it could have just been baked by maybe a Muslim, an Hare Krishna baker, or a Rosicrucian baker, but you brought it to use for the communion. Okay, you say, Reverend Nuga, no. I know the baker. What about the black currant? Did you know the producer of the black currant? Do you know which religion they belong to? But do you know what? The communion should be served by the altar. The same way in the Old Testament, Paul said, they ate the same meat, the same blood, and drank the same spiritual drink, and that spiritual drink is the blood of Christ. That meat is the meat of Christ. But you see, they are by the altar. They did it by the altar, and they said they are partakers of the altar. But you see, here in the New Testament we use bread. They say we are partaker of that one bread. But Jesus now when Paul now brought the subject of altar into communion, Jesus had already earlier told us that altar sanctifies the physical things that were brought. Here how Jesus put it in Matthew 23:18-20. He said, and whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing. That's what people said. But whosoever sweareth by the gift that is upon it, he is guilty. Now that is people's opinion. People say if you swear by the altar, it doesn't mean anything because it's just ordinary stone. In fact, here, like where I'm sitting down here, they say, well, it's just ordinary tithes. It doesn't matter. What matters is the money. Because they are looking at the economic value of the money, but not the spiritual value of the altar. So they thought that altar is just ordinary stone lifted off the normal ground, which we're going to see now in our next episode. In the next area. He said, ye fools and blind. Are you fools and blind? Now when he say blind, that does not mean that all the congregational members that he's talking to that day, they were all blind people. No. What he's talking about, they are blind spiritually. They are blind to what is going on in the spiritual world. The same thing that people who come to the communion are blind to what they are seeing. You know, when people are partaking of the table of the devil, they are blind. They're blind to know that they're not actually eating the meat of Christ and drinking the blood of Christ. They are actually in the coven, eating human flesh and drinking human blood. Many people don't know. They are blind to it. They just open their mouth and eat communion everywhere it is at. No. Altar is important. We're going to be building further on that. He said, you fools are blind. You are fool and you are blind. For whether is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifieth the gift? Now to you it's just an ordinary stone lifted out ground. But do you know what? Jesus said his value is greater than that money. He said, for whether is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifieth the gift? Money doesn't sanctify the altar sanctifies money. Whoso therefore shall swear by the altar, sweareth by it and by all things thereon. Hallelujah. They're blind. Paul said, you cannot be a partaker of the Lord's table and be a partaker of the devil's table. Now that's what he said. Look at that in Look at that in that 1 Corinthians. He said, and I will not that you should have fellowship with devils. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord, talking about communion, and the cup of devils, still talking about communion. But something makes it the cup of the Lord, and something made it the cup of the devil. He said you cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils. Something make it the table of the Lord, and something make it the table of the devil. And do you know what? That what make it like that is the altar. Is the altar. Is the altar. So altars are very, very important when it comes to communion. The altar from which you eat communion from is very important. It's very significant. It's a very vital information. It's very, very important. Very, very important. Very, very important. Hallelujah. Very, very important. So, you might just be thinking that you are eating the Lord's body, and you're actually eating the devil's body. And the Bible says you become one with the altar. It said, those who eat that sacrifice, they are partakers of the altar. Are they not one? They are one. As it was, the Israelites ate it in the Old Testament. And the Bible says it is the Lord's body and it is the Lord's blood. Now, Paul has said, partaker of the Lord's table and partaker of the devil's table. So what makes it the Lord's table? What makes it the devil's table? Is the altar. Is the altar. Is the altar. Say they are partakers of the altar. They become one with the altar. As we also eat that one bread, and we become partakers of the bread. Okay. So I'm just out of time right now. And do you know what? We press further in our next series. Yes, on Friday, on the subject of don't eat communion everywhere. So as for me here, I want to tell you that Jesus Christ is Lord, and I will see you in our Friday 15 minutes podcast. God bless you.